What's up, everybody? I hope y'all are all having an awesome day. I'm Anthony. On today's video, I have an extremely special one for y'all. So, long story short, me and my uncle went in on a hog and we got it processed this past week and got it back. So, not only do I have a whole bunch of meat in my freezer, I also have fat and skin that I wanted to get from that hog. I told him to keep it off to the side because I wanted it. Because I wanted to be able to render my own lard and make my own pork rinds. Something I've always wanted to do. So that's what today's video is going to be about. I want to show you how I went ahead and did this. I want to show you how I rendered the lard down, and I want to show you how I made my very own pork rinds. Now, before I get started, I got to make sure I mention two very important things. Number one, this is a video that's going to be about processing an animal for human consumption. So if you are a vegan, a vegetarian, or someone who just doesn't like seeing this kind of content, you probably don't want to watch this video. So here's your chance now to click off. I'm not going to fault you for it. If you want to just hold off and watch the next video, that's okay. This one's going to actually involve me showing you how I'm processing the animal for human consumption. And secondly, I'm going to do something you're not supposed to do here on YouTube, but I'm going to tell the truth. I have never actually processed a hog to this level before. I've never actually rendered anything besides leaf fat. I've only rendered leaf fat. I've never rendered back fat. For those of you who don't know, the two main types of fats you're going to find on an animal are going to be leaf fat, which is basically the fat that's going to be in and around the kidneys, and back fat, which is primarily the type of fat you're going to find because it's under the skin layer. So after you process an animal down and you cut it, you skin it, and you cut into that meat, obviously the meat's going to be the one going into the freezer. It's going to be getting processed into your your steaks, your loins, your hams, that kind of stuff, and the fat is still going to be attached to a lot of that skin. And that's what I got today for this video. I got a whole bunch of back fat that I'm trying to process further. Alright, so now that all of that is out of the way, let's go ahead and get to the kitchen. I'm going to show you exactly what I did. Okay, so here is what I'm working with. This is about 11 pounds of skin and fat. This is traditionally what you're going to find when you see a butchering of a pig. You're going to see the fat and the skin just like this. It's going to be thrown off to the side because a lot of people care about the meat. They're not really focused on skin and fat anymore unless you want to make something with that. As you see here, I just tried to cut it down to a manageable size. You see all that fat? All that stuff is what I'm trying to use. So all you do is you take your knife. If you have fillet skills, this is where it helps if you're a fisherman like I am. If you have any kind of fillet skills, it actually helps you out because you're able to angle your knife just enough to where you can get a lot of that fat off. That's what you're looking for without cutting into that skin. So having a sharp knife definitely helps here because you're going to be able to get most of that fat off with one swipe. See, and I just take that fat and I try to cut it to, manageable cubes. And then flip it around, do the same thing with this side. This is one of those things I want to make sure I emphasize. It is going to help you immensely if you can get as much fat off as you can. Trust me, from doing this whole process, when you try to get all this fat off, it's going to help you in the long run. So definitely take your time and try to trim off as much as you possibly can. You see how I'm getting this, even this last little bit here. Trust me, it helps. All right, so now we're left with a big chunk of skin, toss side to side. Now, here is what an example of where it's going to be a little bit difficult because the fat starts warming up. Trust me when I say that it actually helps you if you have slightly colder fat, like it's half frozen is best, or if you just keep it in a really cold refrigerator because it's a lot easier to cut through. As you see here, it's getting a lot more difficult, and it's almost as fact it's gummy because this part is warmed up. Okay, this is about half an hour into it, and this piece was touching the bowl that was touching the counter, so it's obviously warmer. And as you see here, you see how spongy that fat is, how it's like wanting to twist with the knife. That's kind of what makes it so difficult because it's moving so much as you're cutting, where it makes it actually almost dangerous. So you can cut yourself here. So you got to be really, really careful. So if I can give you any piece of advice, is to make sure that it's as cold as possible without being completely frozen. That way you can cut it easier. I see why traditionally most pigs were slaughtered in the fall and wintertime, so you can avoid having this problem. Now, as you can see, I got about 3, almost 4 pounds of skin and about 6.5 pounds of fat out of this. Now we're going to be rendering the lard, so I basically threw all the fat into this Dutch oven with a little bit of water to help make sure it doesn't burn on the bottom. If I could go back in time, I would definitely cut this into smaller pieces. I left these pieces way too big, so it took way too long to render. By about an hour in, it looked like this. It was barely rendering down. Yes, it was, but it was going so slow. So I cranked the heat up a little bit, and I made it so that the pieces weren't quite as big by using a potato masher. Yes, like I was making mashed potatoes, and I basically squashed all those pieces of fat into smaller pieces just like this. Now, here's something I gotta make sure I mention. For some reason, I lost the footage of where it actually separated, but if you keep on boiling it down, keep it about 220 degrees. If you keep on boiling it down, you're gonna see it start to render, and the fat is going to turn almost clear, and these pieces are gonna start crisping up into nice little brown bits. Those brown bits are called cracklings. That's what's part the most amazing. And then you take it and you basically strain them out. So there's your fat and there's your cracklings. When you do that, this fat right here is exactly what you're looking for. That is your lard. And before anybody says anything, hey, why isn't it white? This is what it looks like when it's still warm. When it cools down, it turns white, just like that, like lard's supposed to look. And that big quart jar is from the other half of the lard that I did the next day. Okay, so now we are going to make some pork rinds. Keep in mind, I do not actually know how to do this. I've only read about how to do it, so now it's time for practical application. I'm going to learn by doing, so that's what I'm doing here. Basically, you have to take all your skin and boil it. The entire purpose of boiling it is to soften up the collagen and the fats to make it so that it will fry up when you want it to. So you got to get all the fats off it, or at least as much as you can. It's kind of a painstaking process. So you boil it up for about an hour till it gets nice and soft. Then you're going to put it onto a cutting board and scrape with a spoon. Basically like you're scaling a fish, all right? So this is why it pays to, be really precise in the earlier step, but actually when you are cutting the fat away from the skin originally, because the more fat you cut away, the less scraping you're going to have to do. Now, the first couple ones that I did and I wasn't very good at, obviously I left a little bit more fat on there than I wanted to. That's, just my fault. But the later ones, when I started getting to the groove and the rhythm, there wasn't near as much fat and there wasn't near as much scraping that needed to be done. But this is kind of to show you how much scraping you actually have to do. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned that the skin is very brittle here and it's easy to tear, especially when you're holding it down with tongs. So that's why after about 2 or 3 of these, I ended up putting a glove on my left hand to kind of help me with the heat and hold the skins down with my hand so I didn't have to keep putting holes in it with the tongs. So I just wanted to show you all exactly what I'm doing to show you the reality of this whole process. All right, it's kind of a pain in the butt. It's a little bit tedious, but it's necessary in order to get a good puff when you put it into that oil. So you got to make sure you get as much of that skin off, or I'm sorry, the fat off the skin as you can. And unfortunately, this is how you do it. All right, you see how fragile that skin is? I already torn it like 3 times, but you get better at it. Now, when it's all done, you are going to take that skin and you are going to cut it into strips. All right, I went by about 1 inch wide, 2 inches long, or a couple inches long, because I wanted to try to keep it somewhat close to what you would normally see in a store. And yeah, you just take all your skins and cut them up. Now, I want to make sure I mention here that not all skin is created equal, okay? Basically, this is one of those parts of the learning experience. The back skin is thicker and it's treated a lot more differently than, say, the underbelly skin or even the side, like the hams. The back skin is much thicker. This is one of the ones that has like veins in it. I think it was around the neck. So it definitely acted a lot different and it's much thinner. So you have to be a lot more careful with it. Now the next step after boiling and cutting is you got to put it into a dehydrator because you have to dry out as much moisture as you can. Also, perk, whenever you put it in the dehydrator, you are going to get the remaining fat out because it's going to drip. So keep in mind, it's going to drip all over the place. So make sure you have a drip pan down below so you can avoid having a little mess like I did at the bottom of my dehydrator. I turned my dehydrator on for about 5 hours at about 150 65 degrees Celsius to see how that worked out for me. All right, so after about 7 hours total, we are done drying. They got very crispy, so you're gonna go ahead and put that into a container. You see that little bit of shine? That's fats that's left over in the skin. I don't care how much you scrape, there's still gonna be fats in the skin, and when it dries and it constricts like that, that's why they come out so shiny. So it's very paramount that you put like a paper towel or a drip tray underneath so you don't have that stuff all over your dehydrator. As for me, I just put a paper towel underneath the pan that I held these in because I'm not trying to dry these off completely because they're about to go into a bath full of fat anyway. So as you see here, I took all of that lard that I made the day prior and I used that lard to fry it, because that's what the whole purpose of me doing it, so I could fry foods in a healthy fat. So I decided to do that, got up to 350 degrees, and I started dropping them in. Now, this is one of those stages where you're going to want to drop in a few at a time. Don't go super crazy and throw an entire handful in there, because it's going to actually hurt you. You got to make sure you have enough space in there so you can flip them, because as you see here, when they start to puff up, I'll speed it up a little bit, they start to float. And when they start to float, you're not going to get any oil on top. So you're going to have to get in there with a fork and flip them. So that's why you don't want to crowd it. So you want to be able to leave enough space to where you can bring that fork in there and flip them easily. See? Flipped them up. They continued puffing. It was great. Took about 2.5, 3 minutes per batch. So in about 15 minutes, I was completely done. Now, I don't know about y'all, but there's a whole bunch of different flavors you could use. I thought about using just regular salt and pepper, so I said, you know, screw it, I'm just going to use seasoned salt to see how it tastes. And I'm very glad I did. It was actually really, really good. So all you do is just toss it in there a little bit, and congratulations, time to eat. Now, I love this stuff. This tastes great, but my kid, oh my gosh, she just tore it up. All right, so what you think? That's a pretty cool process, huh? That altogether took about 3 days total, because I had to render everything. It took me about 2 days to render all that fat, and then it took me another day to process the skin enough to, you know, obviously dehydrating it and then frying it. So that was definitely quite the lengthy process, because I was doing it solo, but I can definitely see why it takes so long, especially if you're doing it back in the olden times. Because obviously the reason why I wanted to go all into the hog and try all this stuff is because there's an old saying down here in the South where you eat everything from a pig but the oink, because they literally use every single part of the animal. So I wanted to do the same thing, because I didn't want to just be like one of the modern consumers and just eat the meat. I wanted to eat everything, because I wanted to use everything to see exactly if I could do it. And guess what? I can. So I feel much more comfortable now doing what I just showed you in the video, because I just spent the last couple days actually doing it by myself. Just wanted to put this video out here to show you what you can do if you think outside the box. Remember how I said, you know, in that video a couple weeks ago where I said I don't trust the food supply system anymore? Well, I wasn't just blowing smoke. I was actually being serious, and that's why I was seeking out other means and other ways to get my food. Now, when it comes to the legality standpoint of all this, I can't legally walk up to a farmer who doesn't have a license to sell meat. The only thing I can do is go up to a farmer and say, hey, can I buy that live animal? So you buy the live animal, and then it's technically your animal that he's just leasing land to you to use. You know, obviously he's eating off, or you're eating, the animal that you own is eating off his pasture. And then you take that animal that you own and then you process it. You know, you pay for the processing because it's your animal. And congratulations, you have meat that is yours that you couldn't buy from a store. That's the whole point of why I did all this stuff. And it's, you know, kind of a way to skirt the legality aspect of it all, because you can't legally go up to a farm without having a USDA inspection, because you can't sell to public. So it's a big whole, you know, stink. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why they do that. It's just part of another, you know, method of control. But I just wanted to show you to the point where you can get food for your family that's clean, good, awesome, and avoid all those major processors if you just think about it. But I think that's going to do it for me on this video. I hope you all learned something, because I know I sure did. And if you did, please do me a humongous favor and give this video a thumbs up. I very much would appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you are not, and I'll catch y'all later, okay?